this tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about Android architecture components. Okay, so we're gonna what is the goal of this tutorial is I'm going to introduce you Android architecture components, and with the point of view of presenting you some key components of Jetpack libraries and how these Jetpack libraries can help you with your standard Android frameworks, right? So actually we have two questions now from this two questions, okay, because from this statement that I have stated. How Android we have first question is what is a standard Android framework, and the second things are what are Jetpack libraries. Okay, what are the key components of Jetpack libraries. Okay, so the first thing, what is a standard Android library? A standard Android framework. Standard Android framework are the pre-built-in components and libraries provided by Android platform, okay, that developers can use to build Android applications, right? Some of the standard framework are activity framework, fragment framework, layout framework, okay, for creating your layouts, right? And intent framework, content providers framework, broadcast receivers framework, service framework, networking framework, okay, notification framework, storage framework, and so on. But so what are the key components of Jetpack libraries, right? So the Jetpack libraries are some of the cool some of the most used Jetpack libraries are like, for example, you can see room, paging, navigation, life cycle, health, all these Jetpack libraries are being used, okay. Camera, compose, app compact, test, work, all those are some Jetpack libraries, and these are really helping to they are pretty helping to bring like benefits to the standard Android framework. Okay, so this is the concept. You can also check out your Jetpack libraries all here, okay. With your keyword you can filter them. What is the goal actually is to able to create the application that handles the life cycle of activities and fragment with ease, right? So we also need to know about how to process data on Android device using Room. As you can see, Room is usually used for processing the data, store and manage processing data backed by the SQLite database, right? And how can we use view models to separate your logic from views? View models are pretty much part of the lifecycle of our components, okay. And okay, so now the big question is if you remember in my previous lecture videos, we learned about how to write unit tests, right? So but now the big question is like can you unit test activities or fragment? Of course we can use unit test, no, we can UI test activities and fragment, but we cannot unit test activities and fragment, right? So this is the concept. So it is hard to unit test activities and fragment. We can only UI test the activities and fragment. Okay, so the main motivation is to structure your code in such a way that you will move your code away from activities and fragment as much as possible. You move it to the view model, and view model will be handling the heavy load, okay. Instead of putting all your logics in your activity and fragment, we put it in our view model, okay. So this is also another important concept that you have to understand. So also consider like the situations where you are building an application that supports different orientations such as landscape and portrait, right? And also supports multiple languages, multilingual applications. So what tends to happen in this scenario by default is that when the user rotates the screen, the activities and fragment are recreated for the new display orientation. So now imagine that so imagine that your application is in the middle of processing data, right? And you have to keep track of data you are processing. So keeping track of data interact with your screens, and we have to avoid the context link, right? So we have to also handle all these kind of different scenarios, right? And actually Jetpack libraries is pretty helping us with this keeping off the track, right, and just avoiding the context leak. So what is a context leak? Actually, a context leak occurs when your activity is destroyed and cannot be garbage collected because it is referenced in the component with a longer life cycle, such as thread that is currently processing your data, right? So okay, so we will be actually the most common topic are view model, which is of lifecycle components, and we have rooms for persisting your data, like we have navigations, okay, and we have workers, right, to schedule and execute differables constraint based backend task, and yeah, so this is the concept. uh, okay, so as I discussed above, so we were the standard actually, the standard Android framework provides on save instance state to save the current state on your activity or fragment, and then on create or on restore instance state to restore the state of your activity or fragment. But this standard procedure provided by our Android standard Android framework is pretty much complex to your code and makes it repetitive, right? Especially if you are processing code in part of your activity or fragment. So in this scenario, the benefit is of using Jetpack component libraries uh, like view model and live data is very useful, right? So view models are components built with the express goal of holding data in case of lifecycle changes. So they also separate the logic from the views, which make them very easy to unit test, right? So live data is a component used to hold data and notify observers when changes occurs while taking their life cycle into account. So this is the concept, guys. uh, in simpler terms, the fragment only deals with views. View model does the heavy lifting, and live data deals with the delivering the result to the fragment. So this is how we should structure our code using Android components, right? uh, so for example, there is some scenario like if you have ever used WhatsApp or a similar messaging application like Telegram, and you'll turn off when you turn off your internet, you still notice that your messages are still available, right? So what is the reason behind these messages being displayed even if your internet is turned off? Because they are stored locally on your device. So this is pretty much achieved with the database file called SQLite. So Android frameworks already allows you to use this feature for your application. However, it requires a lot of boilerplate code to read and write your data. So every time if you want to interact with the local storage, you must write a SQL query. So when you read the SQL data, you must convert it into Java or Kotlin objects. So all of this requires a lot of code, time, and unit testing. So what if someone else handles the SQLite connections, and all you have to do do is only to focus on the coding part, like the code part, right? So this is where our Jetpack library called Room is very necessary. Right, so yeah, so this is the library that is a wrapper over a SQLite. So all you need to do is define how your data should be saved, and the Jetpack library room will take care of the rest, right? So this is how it benefits the how this is what how the Jetpack libraries is benefiting the standard Android framework. Okay, so this is the concept, guys. um, Also, let's say if you want to your activity to know where there is an internet connection, and when there is an internet connection and when the internet drops. Okay, you can use something like a broadcast receiver for this. A slight problem with this using this is every time you register broadcast receiver in activity, you must unregister it when the activity is destroyed. So you can use the lifecycle, that is obviously the Jetpack, one of the Jetpack library of lifecycle, like lifecycle component. uh, you can use this lifecycle component to observe the state of your activity and thereby allow your receiver to register in the desired state and unregister in the complementary one. For example, resumed, pause, started, stopped, right, created, destroyed. So these are the scenarios. Like view models, live data, and room are all part of the Android architecture components, which are part of the Android Jetpack libraries. Okay, so the architecture components are designed to help developers structure their code, write testable components, and help reduce boilerplate codes. Okay, so other architecture components includes like data binding, which binds view with models or view models, allowing the data to be directly set in the view. Okay, so work manager, which allows developers to handle background work with ease. Navigation, which allows the developers to create a visual navigation graph and specifically specify the relationship between activities and fragment, right. Paging, which allows to load paginated data, which helps in situation where infinite scrolling is required. So yeah, in such a way, we have multiple Jetpack libraries provided to help us reduce the boilerplate code and structure our code and write a clean and testable components, right. So this is the concept, guys. So this is the entire concept of what Android architecture component is. And thank you guys for listening, and catch you up in the next lecture.